Okay. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the September ZBA meeting. Noreen, you want to do a roll call?
Kevin Scully.
Present.
Present.
Here.
Here.
John Seal.
Here.
Okay, please stand for the pledge. And please just note the fire exits behind you and then behind us in case of emergency. Okay, first on the agenda is continued public hearing for Leibowitz, but we have not heard from Leibowitz. So I think I'd like to make a motion to keep the public hearing open.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah. And Dave, you'll just draft up
Well,
we're
the
fine.
hearing's open, so it'll be on the next agenda.
Yep. Yeah, I know. Yeah. And when's the
Hear me?
next,
Yeah. So,
October? Fourth? Alrighty, moving on to new projects. We have the Town of Monroe Planning Board. Please come on up. How you doing this evening?
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name's Bonnie Franson, and I'm the chairwoman of the Town of Monroe Planning Board. And we're here in front of you because our board, our attorney on behalf of our board, submitted to you a notice of appeal with regard to a determination that was made by the building inspector. And so you should have that. It's dated September 7th. And it sets forth what we're asking an appeal from. So I don't know if you had an opportunity to read that or what questions or comments you may have.
Yeah, I've been going over it since I believe we got it last week, and I started going through it all.
It's a very lengthy file.
Yeah, fun times.
Yes.
So, and I'm not sure if all of the board has had a chance, but what I would like you to explain to us, or take the board through, if you will,
Sure.
is what the building inspector is, his determination in the way that he saw it.
So, and I was looking through the packet that you received that was put together, and I'm not sure there's one kind of critical piece of information here, which maybe puts it all together, but this application was referred to us by Mr. Maldonado. He had received building permits to have, or the applicant had submitted them, Summercrest LLC, to conduct emergency repair to siding and roofing for all these various structures. And the reason it ended up in front of the planning board is because the applicant at some point in time had communicated with the town historian, and the historian visited the site and together, communicated about the history, and ultimately the historian wrote a letter saying that this is considered a locally historic property. As a result, there is a section of the zoning that kicks in. It's section sorry, let me just refer to this here.
So he was looking to make improvements on all 19 buildings, right? Do I have that right? 4 single-family, 13 seasonal, 1 rec, and 1 barn?
Well, so this has been part of the question. So what had happened was when we had received the application, there was a communication with the building inspector, and we said, well, what are the uses? Because as part of our, we act as a historic preservation board. That's why it ended up in front of us. And when we do so, part of that consideration is, well, what are the uses? It's 57-32, so that's our historic review provisions. And so part of it is we were thinking, okay, well, what is this, or how is this used? Because this was a summer bungalow seasonal community.
Right.
And so ultimately, Sean Arnott, who's our engineer for the planning board, sent a letter to Mr. Maldonado, and he referred the applications and asked if they could confirm the uses for the buildings. And so it was Mr. Maldonado, in a letter that was sent back to the planning board, who indicated what the various uses were for each of the buildings. And it was either, I think, single family, I believe there's a 2-family, and or seasonal dwellings. And so based on that determination, the building inspector's determination, we decided that we should appeal this to the Zoning Board of Appeals, because we're questioning whether in that applicable zoning district, those uses are allowed in terms of the seasonal dwellings in particular, the summer bungalows. There are kind of 2 provisions in play. One is if they are considered summer cottages or seasonal bungalows, that property and those particular buildings appear to have been abandoned a while ago. And there's some non-conforming use provisions that we believe come into play. There is a section of the code that says if a property had been used as a rental summer development or bungalow colony, considered lawful non-conforming use may be continued. But then there's another section of the code says, but if a use has been abandoned for 12 or more months, then you can't continue that non-conforming use. And so given statements made on the record by the applicant, the applicant purchased the property, and so they had been abandoned for a while, and he's restoring them. It's been a little unclear specifically what the applicant would like to restore them to. And on the record, he's indicated, look, I'm in front of the planning board specifically because all I want to do is put roofing and siding on. But because our application requires that a use be defined, part of this was to refer back to Ben and say, okay, well, what are you finding this falls under? And so we got that determination from Ben. So, I think Mr. Arnott indicated, and I think this kind of sums up where we are, when he had sent this back to Ben, he said, the board requested that I refer this application to your office for a determination of use on the property. The board was concerned that it's being asked to approve work to buildings that may not have a legal use, since some of the buildings have been vacant for some time and appear to have been abandoned, or to appear to have abandoned any pre-existing non-conforming use. The board is asking you to confirm the allowed uses for the buildings. That's when it came back to us, and it wasn't indicated as being vacant or non-conforming. It came back as either, like I said, single family, I think 2-family, and seasonal dwellings, I believe.
In this inspection done August 9th, 2023, unless I missed something, or from what I got out of it, the building inspector is determining 4 single-family year-round dwellings, 13 seasonal summer dwellings, 1 recreational area community building, and 1 barn storage. So and did I hear you say just a little while ago about 2-family?
I I believe that one of the buildings is a two-family. It's been in existence. It's occupied at this time. I believe there are 3 or 4 buildings that are occupied at present. And I believe one of them, if I'm recalling correctly from the presentations, one may be two-family. One, I think, is single-family, and there may be another single-family that are currently occupied.
So am I missing something? So right there, that goes against the determination that the building inspector, because I don't see that he's determining any of those to be two-family.
Yeah, I guess the question would be, and I would only hesitate, in this list of the use determinations, whether or not this list is only for those, let me see, 25 Pinecrest is utilized. Existing single-family year-round. Below detached dwelling. I'm just looking at this.
Yeah, no,
I want to make
there's
sure.
a lot to go through.
Yeah, so 25 Pinecrest, front view, rear view. So those are the first images you see. That's occupied, and it indicates it's a single-family year-round dwelling, so yes. I was just trying to confirm that the ones that are occupied are, in fact, on this list. And then 29 Pinecrest is shown, 31. It's 41.
41
I believe
Pinecrest.
41.
It's broken
Yeah.
down as an A and B at one point.
So 41 is showing as here as a single-family year-round dwelling, and that's showing as a two-family. I don't know if there might be some violation or if that's in question already with the building inspector. Again, there's certain pieces of information he has. We're focused more on those buildings which have come in front of us that especially are identified as seasonal, that don't appear to be occupied and appear to have been abandoned. And again, can you even consider them to be anything but abandoned? And would they ultimately, again, are we allowed to well, we are proceeding as if we're allowed to continue our historic preservation review of the buildings for the roof and the siding. So we're kind of on 2 separate tracks here.
Yes. Right, so the owner is the person that brought in the historic review,
I believe so.
right? So don't claim to be an expert, but then that's a whole different set of standards to follow.
Correct, and that's what then triggered our review, because I think what was happening is there were various improvements and other things happening on the property, had never come in front of our board, but once that local historic designation was made, then it was the building inspector who then indicated to the applicant that they have to come in front of our board in terms of our historic preservation authority. And so that's why this even came in front of us, because it probably wouldn't have if not for that historic. But once it was in front of us, it then became a question of, okay, well, what are the uses, in part so that we could figure out, okay, how do we look at these buildings if we're going to allow them to be sided and roofed, what's appropriate compared to if it was a seasonal bungalow dwelling. And that's where we started to get into this, well, is it even allowed? Because of the zoning district within which it's located. And we just wanted to ensure that we're not going down some path of allowing things that may not be allowed. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, perfect sense. It's,
What are we referring to them as? There's a bunch of different terms. Some
Yeah,
are
there's-
bungalows, some are cottages, accessory. What are we
Well,
going to
I
move
guess-
forward to?
I guess, and I think your attorney would be able to maybe This determination is an appeal from the building inspector's determination. And so I would go with whatever he wrote on his spreadsheet as,
So some of them are single-family year-round dwellings, obviously others are seasonal summer dwelling. And then there's two on here
yep,
that are addressed separately in the letter from the Planning Board Council, where it says, Planning Board is also appealing the determination of the legal use of the recreational area, community building, and barn storage.
correct. And those are identified on this list.
Right.
One identified as recreation area, as you mentioned, that's 45 Pinecrest Lane, and the other is a barn storage accessory structure, which is on an entirely separate lot. And that one that is on an entirely separate lot, our attorney indicated that from our code perspective, normally the use has to be something that's a principal use, and that appears to be an accessory use. And the recreation area, I don't think is allowed. I think she had raised that question, whether or not it's allowed as well.
Does anyone on the board see anything different than I do? Because it's right on the packet that we have. If you flip over, it's the page number 2, where the building inspector states his determination, identifies the legal use for 19 structures, 4 single-family year-round dwelling, 13 seasonal summer dwelling, 1 rec area community building, and 1 barn storage. That, as I went through the packet, and there's a lot to go through, I kept coming back to that. So I don't know if I'm missing something, because right off the bat, I'm having a hard time if we're here to make a determination of what the building inspector is determined to be use. We're already talking about a 2-family home that's not being accounted for. Right? Or am I thinking of that too simply? Right?
Well, he was asked to make a determination as to the legal uses. He made a determination on August 10th. That's attached as Exhibit A to the application. And there's a letter that he submits, making his determination in regard to the uses of each of the properties, each of the
Buildings.
structures.
Yeah, structures.
And that's on a spreadsheet that's attached.
Right.
And the appeal is saying there's 19 different structures that are listed on that spreadsheet with the legal use indicated on the right-hand side. So he's determined for each one that you look at, what the legal use is. And
Yeah, and not how it's being, just say it's another level of fun.
what is the legally permissible use? And he's
Yep.
Mr. Maldonado interpreted the code and interpreted the facts as he saw them on the ground to have these legal uses presently. Oh. George, did you get all that, or you got only a fraction of it?
Talking to somebody else.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, so that's, the appeal is, I think straightforward in that regard. I think the planning board is coming before you saying we disagree for, the several reasons set forth in the narrative that each of these is in fact the legal use. And they're asking you to interpret and apply the code and decide that appeal. And so just in terms of procedurally, I know you have the application documents.
Yep.
I know today, I think late in the day, I haven't had a chance to read it. I read only the first page before I came up here. It looks like the property owner hired counsel or has counsel that submitted something in opposition or stating a position. I didn't read it yet. But procedurally, where you were at is this is a typical first meeting, even though it's an unusual application. It's not an applicant looking for an area variance, which is 90% of what you see before you. You have an application, the same procedures apply. Are there any documents or is there any information you'd like from the applicant before you deem it complete and, or is it ready to go and ready for you to schedule it for a public hearing? And that's really what's before you. And if anybody else has any other questions of the applicant in regard to, understanding anything more about what the application is, that would be appropriate now too.
As usual, Counselor, you are correct in what you're saying, but as we sit here as a board and you listen, or I listen, to the use and what they determine and the reality, I always find it a hard thing to not let the two of them cross. But as usual, you are correct. I know this property pretty well throughout the years. Anyone on the board have any comments or any more questions on what they want to hear?
Yes, let me just,
What are we talking about? I think it's 17 acres, the one parcel,
yes,
give or take, right?
17.
Know how long it's been vacant?
Never. Excuse me? I don't believe it's been vacant, so to speak. There's been summer cottages that have been abandoned, but people have been living
Living on that property.
property.
Not all the buildings are in use, as you can tell by the
The
pictures.
4 buildings that have been lived in pretty consistently.
Right.
Maybe there was a little time gap in the sale, but they've been lived in.
Yeah,
The 4 single-family year-round dwellings have been lived in.
But
Right.
aside from those 4 structures that
They've all been
have been
abandoned.
occupied, the rest have been pretty much abandoned.
I'm not sure that all 4 were, or if one of them was more recently. Certainly at least 2 appear to have been, if they were seasonal, converted a while back
Has
to
there been any
year-round, it appears.
Has there been any information put forward by the applicant from the planning board as far as determining that, how long they have been occupied or not?
No, not really. A lot of something specific, I don't think so. I think some of the information we've been looking at have been from the tax assessment information, where, you look at a property inventory, what's there, and some of them look to have been occupied. But whether they've been abandoned or not abandoned, clearly some of them are in a condition that there's no way they could have been inhabited for some time. But how long the ones that appear to be used year-round have been used year-round, I don't know that we specifically have that information. The building inspector may, maybe the tax assessor does, but I don't know that we have that, or if we did, I don't know that it's in this package. I mean, what is here is there's information on when this particular applicant acquired the property. There's a recording deed in here. But that won't speak to, what was vacant and what was occupied at the time. I would say, I think that based on the representation in the minutes, the applicant has indicated what are not used and what are being used. I would say that.
The applicant has made a record before.
Yes, I think those are here contained. I think we have some of the minutes contained
There's
in
some
the
of the
back.
Back of the packet, I've seen those.
The applicant has provided other photos, and at the last meeting, I don't know if he left, I don't recall if the thumb drive was left behind, but did provide a drone images, video. Sorry?
I never saw a video. Okay.
Yeah, so that's, it shows kind of, again, the overview of the structures. There's some photos in there as well. You can see that they've been trenching, installing new electric meters, trenching utilities. The applicant did indicate they had gotten 911 numbers for all the buildings.
How was that possible without use?
I asked the same thing. I believe the applicant indicated it was for health and safety reasons. I was trying to determine who would have issued them because I don't know how 911 is done, and if these are vacant buildings, is it normal procedure to apply a 911 number to something that looks like it's run down, dilapidated, or can't be inhabited? So I don't know what that process is. It may have been the highway superintendent, but at the time, because this was done, I think, a little while back, I don't think it's the current highway superintendent that might have issued that.
You mentioned underground electrical. Is that going to all of the structures or just the ones that are?
I believe all of them. And again, I think I think you'll see those images in some of our submissions. And I believe you can see it maybe in the drone video, but there's been a lot of photos and other things that have been submitted that show trenching being done for all the units.
I was just trying to read what this is what you were referring to. This came late. Noreen handed us as we were starting the meeting.
Just as a matter of
I haven't seen
procedure,
it, so.
this is only the second time, I think, that the planning board has come up before us for this in the past few years. This does go to public meeting, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, like everything else.
Right.
Like a public hearing?
Yeah, a public hearing.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yes.
So this is more along the lines for
Information.
public
Yep.
meeting.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments from the board, I'm not hearing anything.
And 13 houses as seasonal/summer dwellings.
Excuse me?
The building inspector put these 13 or 14 houses as seasonal summer dwelling.
Yes. It's as per that table.
But-
That's part of our package. That was a
But according to
determination.
the code, if something's been abandoned for 12 months or more, it's nothing. Am I
Well,
correct?
well, so that's our question.
Okay.
That's why we have this
Okay.
appeal
I
in
just
front
want
of
to
us
be clear that
because,
he has it as dwelling and, okay.
yes. Yeah, that was his determination. We're looking at buildings that appear to have been abandoned.
Oh, they're
And-
abandoned, yeah.
And so if that's the case, was it appropriate to make the determination that they are either, the ones that are not being utilized, are they really seasonal dwellings? Or are they really just vacant, abandoned buildings, I guess? So that's why we're here in front of
Okay.
you. And in terms of the ones that are occupied, I think that there's some other questions that we had in our appeal. But I would say the primary interpretations we're looking at is to how the building inspector rendered a determination as to those uses for the seasonal dwellings in particular. But again, in terms of everything and all our questions, they're set forth in our planning board attorney's letter to your board.
And are we making any kind of barn and the casino or the recreation hall?
Yes, it does mention that as well on page, I believe it's 4, where in the last paragraph on page 4 of the Naughton and Torrey letter, it says, relatedly, Planning Board also appeals the determination as to the legal use of the recreation area, community building, and barn storage accessory structure. So she's asking for, on our behalf, whether that was an appropriate interpretation. Again, because it's been vacant. And yes, there are references to casino because that used to be the old term.
I know what it was, yeah.
Yeah.
We all,
It was a
anybody who grew up in the
recreation
bungalow
hall.
colonies.
They called them casinos, not as in gambling, yeah.
Circle back around, you said that the primary concern, obviously, of your application is to the factor of the abandonment, but you said the planning board also has, I guess as part of the application, as far as the other 4 structures that are currently occupied?
I want to state that she did indicate, additionally, with respect to structures determined to be single-family year-round dwellings, it's unclear when such uses were established, and it appears one or more variants would be required to have more than one single-family dwelling on the same lot. So, not that it's not a use that's allowed in that particular zoning district, because single-family detached dwellings are allowed, but it's more the fact that there are multiple single families on the same lot, and the way we believe the town of Monroe zoning law is set up, that it was expected that there be one dwelling on a lot. But again, I think those ones would require probably more review from the perspective that I don't know how long they've been occupied as such. And, did they proceed when, would they have been allowed at some point in time when they were converted? I think that requires more history, I believe.
Is it in dispute regarding the two-family house? I see on Mr. Maldonado's spreadsheet, it doesn't list the two-family house, but on Mr. Arnott's report, the town engineer, it does list the two-family house. Is that in dispute as far as the category of that house, single-family versus two-family, to your knowledge?
I don't know if that's not a dispute between the applicant and the building inspector. I mean, we have our determinations. I believe that's been represented as a two-family.
Okay,
by
because
the
that's, like you
applicant.
said, that's obviously a consideration as well, as you said, single-family homes on the same plot versus now considering a two-family home in addition to that.
Which isn't indicated on Mr. Maldonado's
Correct,
table.
right.
Are we being asked to interpret the barn and rec hall as abandoned or not abandoned, the same as the summer bungalows?
Yes, and then I believe the letter also talks about, the use of, I believe it's the barn building, because of the fact that you typically don't have or allow an accessory building on a lot unless there's a principal use associated with it
Yeah.
on the same lot. So is that,
Barn is being generous.
yeah,
I've seen it. It's-
okay. Have you had a chance to go up there at
Are we
all?
allowed to go in there? It's a private road.
I guess you'd have to ask
Yeah, we'd have to
the
find out.
property owner, yeah.
Drive through. I was going to, but it's a private road. It's not like, I'm not going on somebody's property.
Right. I know as a planning board, we have on our applications of consent to be able to go up and view it, and certainly the applicant has offered, to be there and to show us the buildings, et cetera. But again, the separate board, and I don't.
Yeah, the applicant would not have signed a consent necessarily
No,
for the
this is-
zoning
this
board
is
of
the
this
applicant.
application.
Right,
So,
right, because we're the applicant
Yeah,
in
you're
this
the applicant,
instance,
so-
correct.
I didn't hear what you
Your mic, please.
just, sorry.
And I will have to let Mr. Mitz know, and I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem with you coming out to the property.
We can deal with that and see if we have that permission, and if we do, then, you know, you can set it up.
Where's the historic?
It is not. It was something that was done by the town historian. So it's been designated locally. Whether Mr. Mitz pursues something beyond that, I'm not aware of, but again, this was a local designation as per our own code. I think we checked, and I don't believe it was National Register or State Register listed or eligible. I'm not sure if that letter that the historian provided is in your packet, but if it's not, we can provide that to you, because that kind of triggered this whole process in front of us.
I
And I don't
think,
know if it's
I
useful.
think that would be a good idea to submit that.
Noreen, you probably have that, if you could provide it to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you.
Well, if there's no other further questions or comments, you want a little bit more time to browse through it, I'd like to make a motion to move this on to a public hearing in October 24th. Noreen, is that what we did?
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, and if
Thank you
there's...
very much.
You're welcome. If there's
Thank you.
anything, I guess, questions, you would direct it perhaps to Noreen and our attorney, if there's information that you need, but we'll get the historic letter to the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. All right, next, returning projects, we have Kolakowski. Did I get that right this time? Did I get that right? Yeah, okay, great. How you doing? All right.
Last time,
Talking to the
You
mic,
gotta
please.
talk into the mic.
last time we were here, you had requested drawings. They were submitted. So I'm not sure if the board has any other questions for us.
Yeah, I appreciate you getting those to us. I think one of the comments I had when I was looking at the drawings, and this is just the way I was picturing what you were describing last time, I thought it was a little more substantial than the way you were describing it. So, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words,
Yeah.
and that's why we always ask for these drawings. So if I remember, and I don't know if any of the board, Zach, did you have any comments on that when?
Yeah, the first time we talked about it, it seemed like it was obviously a smaller job. This seems like it's gotten a little bit bigger, so I was kind of just interested in seeing the plans this time, but if you could run down on have stairs going up to the attic, kind of says that the attic won't be used, large attic rooms at the plan.
That's correct.
So essentially, where you're adding a staircase that will bring us up to a sitting room in
Sitting
front
area.
of the attic doors, and then there's going to be 3 different attic spaces, compartments, essentially.
Right,
Okay. Is that attic currently being used now for
storage.
storage? Okay. Yeah, I just didn't expect it to be as large of a deal as it was.
House is large.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. I've never seen the house, so I didn't recognize how big or what the setup of this was going to be.
And really, then, just to go over, the reason why you were here is, were these violations or the zoning violations, was it the rear yard, the lot coverage? Right, that's actually the reason why you came in front of us, is that correct?
That's correct.
And were those pre-existing conditions?
Yes.
You
Yes,
talk loud, but without that,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Sure.
register.
yes.
Anyone else on the board get a chance to go over the drawings that they sent? And any other comments on what they provided for us? I do agree with Zach. It is a little more, it's a lot more robust than,
I thought it was just a little, like, porch roof.
yeah. Yeah,
Is
exactly.
what I thought it was.
Yeah, a glorified awning, if you will.
Yeah.
But, with the stairs, it seems like it could be additional living space at any time.
Yes, it does.
So that's all duly noted. So I guess if there's no other questions or comments on what they provided, and again, thank you for providing that, I would like to make a motion to bring this to a public hearing, again, October 24th.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
When I see it like.
Can I help you with anything out there? Sure. Yeah, good. All right, so I think you sent some minutes.
What happened to Luciano?
Take care, Pete.
That's
Why
Been
is it
going on a
come, why
while.
is it on our agenda? That's the part I don't
we
understand.
were
Because he
hoping
had
that they were
until
going to
yesterday
pay.
morning to bring me a check.
Ah,
We were
Checks in the
hoping that
mail.
they were going to pay.
okay. I was wondering, because that was years, I remember that.
Been removed twice. I have to put it,
I understand. Okay,
list it, and then
okay. I thought he was coming in to try and do it all over again. I got it now.
he's trying to redo everything that he. Now we got a whole other summer out of it.
Everyone had a chance to go over the meeting minutes for July. I went over it, and on my keen eye, I saw nothing.
Good as well.
We have to make a motion on those minutes are clean. I'd like to make a motion that the July 25th, 2023 minutes are impeccable.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Maureen, I abstained because I wasn't at that meeting.
In the August 22nd minutes, don't have them. So that's all we have? All right. If there's no other business out there, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, George.